Welcome to the Lord and Richards Show, a program that will enable you to become more financially independent and prosperous from a biblical point of view. Tune in each week to learn how to prosper through good markets and bad. Now, here's our co-hosts, Colin Richards, your biblical investment advisor, and Dylan Schoonover.
Hello, America, and hello, Colin. How are you today?
Well, howdy, Dylan. I'm doing just fine, thank you.
It's going to be a wonderful day on the Lord and Richards Show. Today, I'm Dylan Schoonover, joined alongside CEO and founder Colin Richards, and we're going to have some fun talking about boomers and what they don't know that advisory firms aren't telling them.
Yeah, there's unfortunately a lot that boomers need to know that I just don't think is being shared in an open and honest and transparent way. And the paradigm has shifted. It's not the same approach to retiring and investment that our parents had before us. It's a new game, and unfortunately, it's a more complex game than the business of just stashing money away and then retiring on your portfolio. There's a lot more to it than that.
So it's not just Monopoly where you try to get all the properties and then you win.
Well, you can do that too, yes. But speaking of real estate, great investment, right? But I tell my clients, you need something to back that up. So yeah, some people will kind of fixate on a strategy. Maybe they hear about oil on the radio and they buy up oil, but there's many different paths that we can follow, and it's gotten more complex, and I think we can clear some of that up today.
Yeah, let's jump into some of those. So one of them I think that is just a commonality you hear is the 60-40, 60-40, 60-40. Everybody's talking stocks, bonds, and that's just been in for a long period of time. But there's some problems with the 60-40. And can you explain what it is and then what you see that might be at issue with it?
Retirement is requiring a level of expertise, a level of professionalism. So we advocate for getting people that are certified financial planners on your team. And we have that at Lord & Richards. We advocate for comprehensive planning as opposed to just brokering financial tools. Nothing wrong with tools and nothing wrong with being a broker, but when it comes time to play the game of retirement, which we hope is fun, you're going to need more expertise than that. And so as things have gotten more complex over the last decades, the tools that we bring to bear, the financial professionals that we bring to bear are even more important than they have been in the past. The 60-40 portfolio, unfortunately, could be labeled an oversimplification, right? Using the brain surgery analogy, if somebody says, yep, no problem, I just zip open your head, whip something, we don't want to hear oversimplification when it comes to our health, and I don't think we should do that when it comes to our wealth. The 60-40 portfolio is simply 60% stock, 40% bonds. And the idea that was proposed years ago is just as you get older, you start to reduce the amount of stocks, which can normally take on more risk, but have more reward, and you start to increase the bonds in your portfolio, which normally have less risk and less reward. And the idea is as I get older, we see this in target date mutual funds that are used in 401ks. People will say, oh, I'm in the 2030 fund because that's when I want to retire. And they just kind of automatically rebalance. No problem. It's fine. Those are some of the tools that are unfortunately, and I've said that word a lot in this episode, but those are the tools that are typically used in 401ks. But as soon as we can, we need to start breaking free of those oversimplified strategies.
Yeah, if you call in at the break and you tell us how many times Colin said, unfortunately, we will give you a fine prize, but we can't tell you what that is until you call in.
Lord & Richards pen.
So how did the old 60-40 rule work out in 2022, Colin?
So 2022, 2008, 2009, and other time periods began to really blow apart the oversimplification of the 60-40 or the 70-30 portfolio. Because we discovered that bonds, which are not supposed to go down when stocks go down, actually can do that. And in 2022, just broadly, if we looked at stock market indexes like the S&P 500, they were down 25% plus. But also in that same year, you could be invested in a broad bond portfolio and also be down 25% on that side of your portfolio. Wasn't supposed to happen. But here's what happened is we've been through this before. In 2008, 2009, we saw the exact same thing happen. And back then, you could have invested in almost anything and it was down. 14 out of 16 of the different broad categories of investments were all down. You were lucky if you were in cash. But with that knowledge now available to us, going back to old strategies that say, oh, your stocks will go up and your bonds will be just kind of okay, and then your stocks will go down and your bonds will go up. That doesn't happen consistently anymore.
Sure. Is it a potential concern that sometimes, for the sake of saving face or reliability, that advisors might continue to push a model even if the model's not working?
I think more often, and you've alluded to this before, Dylan, it's because that's what they have available. You know, I've got a family right now that is entering the industry, and I'm giving advice, and I'm discovering that he's interviewing firms where his hands are tied. His options would be limited because that's what the firm makes available to their advisors. So I think more often than not, it really is the burden that is on the firm to get out of these oversimplified 60-40 portfolios, model portfolios, and start to deliver to their clients real solutions that can weather the storms, whether we're in a good market or a bad market.
Yeah, talking about the market, do you feel from an economic standpoint, specifically from a boomer's perspective, is it a more continuity-based market right now where people can feel comfortable? Or are we sitting in a situation where they feel more undulation than maybe they ever have?
Well, the market is like history. It repeats itself. And recently I had another conversation where a family member said to me, oh, the Dow Jones dropped by X% today. And I said, that's fine. And they're like, well, don't you want to do something, react? By reacting to the constant ups and downs of the market, and in other words, by focusing on, are we in a time where we're about to see the market drop, we get reactive. I want to be proactive and design a portfolio that assumes the market is going to drop, assumes that we're going to have bad times, and sometimes for a long time. From 2000 to 2010, we call that the lost decade. It's in the rearview mirror for a lot of people, but many of us who lived through that can remember that you can actually go through a whole decade and show no forward momentum at the end of that decade. So our time horizon has got to get long, and we've got to build into our plan the not just likelihood, but the absolute certainty that we're going to face another downturn at any time, and it's probably not going to be convenient for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's easy to say that people may be getting complacent. I mean, from, 11-year stretch here not long ago, we had the longest bull run that we've seen since really Jordan was playing basketball, right? And so I don't know that it's realistic for people to think that, well, the market's just always going to go up. But recency bias can be a problem, right?
I see the rose-colored glasses come out a lot, and people will describe seemingly dispassionately, they will describe it as if it was no big deal how they weathered the past storm, forgetting that, number one, they've aged since that time. So if we're talking about like a market of 08, 09, and we recovered and we came out of that just fine, so I'm not worried about it. The market generally goes up. Well, you've aged since 2008, 2009, quite a few years, and you may be entering a phase where you cannot afford to go through a market decline and keep withdrawing money from your portfolio. That's negative compounding. So your circumstances have changed, you've aged, and your risk tolerance has changed. A lot has changed. And so looking back with rose-colored glasses and saying, oh, I'm fine, I don't think the market's ever going to hurt me, that would be a mistake.
Yeah. And I think your attitude toward the daily is important, saying, well, it's just one day. I'm not going to change our strategy on that. But how does Lord Richards come alongside a client and make them feel comfortable? Because I think even when somebody loves what we have to say, they still don't like seeing the market go boom, 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 boom. And so what do you do to ensure that they fully understand the plan, to understand the plan isn't for today, the plan isn't for a week, the plan is for the duration of your retirement?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you remember the very old show with Robin Leach, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, but he'd take you around to all the beautiful homes and things. Well, while the rich and famous can sometimes be people we don't want to emulate, there are some people who are really good at it. And what happens is if you want to build wealth, that's one strategy. You want to keep wealth, that's another strategy. And we refer to that as being in the accumulation versus the distribution phases. So when we come alongside of you and build together with you a plan as a client of Lord & Richards, we're going to build in, the likelihood that you will see downturns, and we're going to build a part of that portfolio that that has zero exposure to that. Most brokers and investment advisors simply place you in investments where you always have exposure. Whether it's stocks, whether it's bonds, or other fancy tools, you always have exposure. To me, that's a recipe for needing Pepto-Bismol, right? Because I'm not going to sleep well if I go through a 2000 to 2003, a 1987, or a 2008. What I want is a portion of my portfolio that covers all of my lifestyle. Everything that I dream about and want to achieve is protected from market fluctuations, so that other portion of my portfolio, as we refer to it, the barbell, can be free to invest aggressively, and I don't worry about it, right? The rich don't position themselves so they have to have a fire sale of their assets every time markets swing. They have some of their assets that are safe, reliable, and predictable so that they can be more aggressive and afford to take time. Warren Buffett is a great example of this. He says if you can't afford to own a stock for 10 years, you shouldn't own it for 10 minutes. And so a long-term build out of your portfolio allows you to kind of relax during those wild fluctuations in the moment, because you've got your situation set up using another part of your portfolio that has no market risk whatsoever.
Yeah, that's great. Well, when we come back from the break, I think there's actually a third stage I want to ask you about, and we're going to have you find out what the number one question is that you should ask your financial advisor, and if they can't answer it, you should fire them. We'll be back at the Lord and Richards Show.
You're watching The Lord and Richards Show, a program that can help you become more financially independent. Tune in to learn how you could become prosperous during good times and bad.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Welcome back to the Lord and Richards Show. We are pleased to have you join us. I'm Dylan Schoonover, joined alongside CEO and founder Colin Richards of Lord and Richards. Boy, it's been a pleasure listening in that first segment to kind of hear some things that you were giving boomers advice on. But I wanted to touch on, before the break, we didn't get there, so we'll pick it up now. They've got distribution phase, which we know is when you've accumulated assets and then you've kind of got those assets where they need to basically outlive your death, essentially, is what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you the life that you want to live before you die. But for the advanced planner, or for the person who is really thinking about legacy, there's really a third phase, which is legacy planning. And so maybe you've got an abundance of money for yourself, whether it's through pensions or through rental properties or through just an abundance of assets that you've been given some way, shape, or form, or earned. So how does Lord and Richards look at legacy planning, and how do you help clients plan for that for the next generation? Because that is a big deal for some clients.
Yeah, well, whether you subscribe to the teachings of the Bible or not, you have to agree that there's a great deal of wisdom there. And the wisest individual, apart from God himself, that was ever pointed out on earth was the man named Solomon, the second king of Israel, or the third, rather. And so when Solomon wrote his book of Proverbs, which are maxims of moral wisdom, one of the things he said is a wise person leaves an inheritance to their children's children. I like to say that means you can skip your kids if you don't like them and go straight to the grandkids.
There you go.
But I think the idea here is a multi-generational legacy. I've studied some of the lives of the most financially successful people in history, like the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. Unfortunately, most of these people did not implement great wisdom in passing that on to succeeding generations. So you watch the Vanderbilt family, and that entire wealth legacy evaporates within just a couple of generations. And if you want to tie in there, that's your Biltmore house, right? George Vanderbilt actually built that house. And so now they have to run a business to keep the money going, right? So if you're concerned about what happens to your money after you pass on, because that's one of the questions I ask. I ask, what do you want to have happen when you retire? What do you want to have happen if you get sick and you got bills that aren't paid by insurance? And then I ask, what do you want to have happen when you pass on to what you leave behind? And for most people that I talk to, they're somewhere on the spectrum of oh, I would absolutely like to leave something behind to my family or to charities or causes. I've got the complete opposite spectrum, which is, Colin, could you help us figure out how to make the last check bounce? That's a valid opinion, where folks have said, hey, we've done a lot for our kids and family. This is for us to enjoy. Perfectly valid. But most people kind of fit in the middle, and here's what they say to me. They say, Colin, how about this? How about we just make sure that the money is available and we can use it during our lifetime, and then what's left over, I want to make sure, rather than going to the government or nursing homes or hospitals, I want that to go to family and causes I enjoy. And that's probably our most typical scenario. And we've got some strategies to help you do that.
One of your messages recently has been about getting out, doing, being active, spending some of your money. Have you seen that retirees are a little bit too on the sidelines, a little bit too nervous about having some fun and, doing some things they desire?
Oh yeah, I remember when I first began meeting with people about their retirement, I was actually meeting in their homes. And unfortunately, we've just got a lot of people now, and that's not logistically possible. But I sat down in the home, and they still had the 70s carpet. I grew up with shag, and
you could find toys in there, though. That stuff was so long.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. You could lose things in the shag carpet. Well, the wife desperately wanted to just do a little bit of remodeling, some new carpet, maybe some things to the kitchen. And I looked at their investment statements, their portfolio. I knew we could build a plan where they had an abundance, but they just felt they couldn't afford it because they had kind of lived life on the extreme frugal end. And that's more common than we might think. The people who manage to accumulate the most tend to budget themselves and live within their means. So one of my jobs, one of my challenges as a counselor is to make sure that I encourage people to start spending that money in retirement, living on it. Now, that might sound like it's a clash with legacy, but when we show you your retirement plan, what happens is if you're too frugal, you end up accumulating a huge balance, more than you ever lived on for your family. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. For most people, I think there's more of a balanced approach where they say, well, we want to live well, but we also want to have something to leave behind.
Yeah, that's completely reasonable. And I think that it just was interesting because, you don't always hear an advisor, presenting to a group of clients or talking one-on-one with clients and saying, hey, let's get out there and do this. Like, let's live some life. And so I think that's great that you're being proactive that way to, get them going.
Yeah. And I stood up in public recently and told my clients, retire earlier, spend more, retire earlier, spend more. And after that, I met with a client and they literally told me, Colin, you inspired us. We're going to take a trip with our family and we're going to do more while we're alive rather than just leaving it all behind.
Yeah, that's great. And that kind of goes in line with, maybe playing it a little less safe. It's important to have safety rails and guardrails in your portfolio, but you can't let the market's ups and downs dictate the fact that, hey, you don't have to be on the sidelines the whole time, right?
Yeah, I think the way to do it, Dylan, is to have a part of your portfolio say that this is for us, and if we can manage to spend every dime of it, and Colin and his team can figure it out, perfect. Somebody has said that you take a billionaire versus a person who could have any amount of money withdrawn for any reason whatsoever, but they had no balance. So in other words, they had, some kind of fountain of eternal money.
Right.
That person is actually wealthier than the person with $1 billion in the bank because they know that no matter what happens, their needs are met, whereas the billionaire has to constantly watch his pile. So what we want to do is create that feeling where you just always know you have an abundant supply of money for whatever you need. And then you can take other assets, a smaller portion of your portfolio maybe, and designate that as, hey, we're going to do some special things here for legacy and separate those purposes out. Yeah. I like to say the purpose of money dictates where you should put it. So money that's intended for retirement should probably go in a different place than money that you'd like to leave behind.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, as promised, coming back from the break, we're going to tell you the number one question that you should ask your financial advisor. And if they can't answer it, you fire them. We'll see you real shortly here on The Lord and Richards Show.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Welcome back to the Colin Richards Show, and we're going to answer the question now of what it is you should ask your financial advisor, and if they can't answer it, you should fire them. Colin, the question is, you should ask your advisor, how do you protect me if the market crashes next month? A lot of people don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, and by not preparing in advance for that question, an advisor has shown that they either lack the tools or the strategy to deal with what is not just a likelihood, but it is going to happen. The markets are going to crash. Our markets are cyclical. We experience a bear market on average every 6 or 7 years, so you just need to build that into your plan and not bury your head in the sand. But what we at Lord & Richards do to resolve that issue, to answer that question, is we have a conversation with you in advance about how much risk you're comfortable taking in your pursuit of growth in your portfolio.
Yeah, and I think that's part of your client experience journey as you take a client through the process, right?
Right, we call it a retirement freedom review, and right there in our first meeting, after we've talked about all the things you'd love to do and experience in retirement, the people that are important to you, the causes that are important to you, where you want to spend your time and money, we're also going to have a very valuable conversation that most people have never had about literally how many dollars, not just are you conservative or moderate, but how many dollars are you okay with seeing your portfolio go down before something needs to change in your investment strategy.
Yeah, I think you also affectionately refer to it as the pyramid of doom sometime when looking at risk. And speaking of risk, a lot of times when you guys come back together for that second meeting with the client and you've given them a little bit of an assessment of what's going on currently and then what you might propose of some trouble spots, it's not uncommon, even though people are nearing or in retirement age, that you're seeing 60, 70, sometimes 80+% of their portfolio still sitting at risk. Why do you think that's happening, and what adjustments should be made there?
You know, Dylan, it's worse than that. I've seen people in their 90s with all their portfolio in one stock.
Wow.
And there's different kind of risk.
What'd they own?
I won't reveal it. But it's a fruit and it's not an orange.
Okay.
So what I've discovered is sometimes people just get complacent, or an advisor gets complacent. This happens more in, I think, the do-it-yourself people, where they just build up and they never take the opportunity to diversify. So certain positions just grow and grow and grow and take over the portfolio like a weed. Because they're the growing positions, now they have more and more and more risk. What we're going to do at Lord & Richards is different. Number one, we're not going to just let that happen by default, but we're going to build and design a portfolio that, yes, we keep up with on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, but also it has some features that are different from the kinds of portfolios where we can just let stocks or bonds or whatever build up all on their own.
Makes a lot of sense, because obviously at the end of the day, you have to answer to the client if the market doesn't go the way it's supposed to and they've got all that risk, right?
Yeah, well, and sometimes clients feel that they're really risk tolerant, you know, but when we actually pull out what I call the pyramid of doom that you just said a moment ago, Dylan, it's a pyramid where risk gets successively greater as you go down and losses get greater, and clients select a point somewhere along that continuum where they say, okay, that's far enough. You know, I need a floor under my feet right there. And that's what we'll do. Lord & Richards will put a floor under your feet. Our team will design and develop a plan that is designed in advance to withstand markets that could potentially carry you lower than you're comfortable going.
Makes a lot of sense. So wrapping up today's segment, we've talked a lot about what boomers maybe didn't know, didn't expect, didn't realize that they had going on in their portfolio, and maybe oftentimes had maybe a little too much confidence in the way they were aligned when they didn't realize they weren't maybe aligned correctly.
Yeah, there's a saying that the difference between a house that can withstand a hurricane and one that doesn't is not obvious until after the storm is over. So what we're going to do is we're going to create like a little sample storm. We're going to actually take your portfolio through some stress, and we're going to simulate terrible market conditions, good market conditions, and everything in between. And you'll see that storm unfold before your very eyes. And we're going to do that with the portfolio you're sitting in. And then we're also going to do the exact same thing to anything that we're going to recommend, so that you see, oh, wow, even in a worst case, here's my situation. And we're going to design that so you're comfortable with that situation.
Right. And if people want to go through this process with Lord & Richards, what does that look like? How do they do that?
Well, first and foremost, it's free. We don't charge our clients for planning. And so if you become a client of Lord & Richards, you come in, you go through our process, you get the opportunity to develop a plan, have a conversation about the things that are most important to you, and we build and design that plan around you. And we do it to withstand not only market fluctuations, but the high likelihood that you'll face unexpected healthcare costs, such as long-term care that can go into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We'll actually plan for that in advance. You know, I would rather, when the storm comes, I'd rather close all the windows and not just deal with a few on the ground floor and forget about the ones on the top floor.
Yeah. Yeah, wind's still going to take them out, or lightning or thunder or tornadoes, and so we want to make sure that everybody's protected in all layers of the house, if you will.
That's right.
Colin, thank you for joining us today. It's been a delight to have you, and of course, all of you listening and watching online. If you guys would like to learn more, please give us a call or visit our website at lordandrichards.com.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Take the first step toward securing your financial future. Request an appointment today. Whether you're planning for retirement, managing your wealth, or optimizing your business finances, we're ready to help you achieve your goals. Visit us online at lordandrichards.com for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Investment advisory services offered through Lord & Richards Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor.